the Israel war has really kind of fractured some of the alliances, or at least short-term partnerships, that like some of us on the left have made with those sort of across the aisle on the subject of speech. Like, we've seen a lot of, right of center, supposed free speech champions sort of reveal themselves to be very one-sided in their commitments, while a lot of, left-wing or liberal anti-free speech sort of bullies like Mehdi Hasan, right down to, I would argue, like the rank and file student bodies at these Ivy League universities, right? Very pro-censorship until they get censored for protesting the Israel war. We've seen student peace groups get suspended from schools and things like that. And some on the right, not all, but some of the right have cheered that on, calling them, terrorist sympathizers and stuff like that. So do you have any observations about that sort of crackdown on like campus speech, pro-Palestine speech, pro-ceasefire speech? And I guess the B part of that would be, as someone like yourself who's been branded both left and right wing, depending on who's doing the branding and when, how can we build like meaningful, long-lasting, cross-partisan consensus in defense of the actual principle of free speech?
I mean, that's a great question, right? I mean, it was even worse than that. I mean, so some countries just outright banned, protests.
Yeah, in France, they said you're not allowed here. In Germany, they didn't technically ban it, but the cops would break up every protest that they could find until it got too big, which thankfully many of them did.
Exactly, yeah. And then there were some campuses that were doing similar things right here in the States. And it was a little frustrating for me because this is one of the things that I've been saying all along, is that this kind of censorship affects Palestinians. It has for years. Glenn Greenwald wrote about this in 2016. That was actually one of the first times that we saw this deal, which is implicit in this kind of censorship, where a company like Facebook in Palestine is like the only media that there is. It's the only functioning way that people can communicate with each other, get news. And so when Facebook made a deal basically with the Mossad, and I think it was 2015, 2016, and they ended up having an arrangement where Glenn reported it was 95% of requests were fulfilled in 2016. And that was the first of these arrangements, and we saw it even with the CTI files that we did, a week ago, earlier this week, that Michael Schellenberger and I wrote. There was a free Palestine hashtag. There was the UN CPR. It's another American pro-Palestinian organization. They were being monitored as a threat. So it's not just a right-wing thing, and this is always the case. But the problem is, man, we thought at this whole experience of the last 3 or 4 years had finally convinced Republicans, like, you got to stay on the principle on this thing, because look at how hard you can be hit with this.
Right.
And the instant this happened, you saw there's this massive defection of people who'd been saying the exact opposite for the last 2-3 years. And that's, it's pretty upsetting. Although I still think a large part of the caucus is going to end up being, on the pro-free speech side, at least through the 2024 election, because they're scared of another election integrity partnership type of thing developing. But I don't know. What's your conclusion about that? Because I think you're right. Like, they've managed to rope in people, on both sides. And partly it's a generational thing. There's just both left and right. There just isn't that kind of tradition of respecting free speech and respecting free dialogue anymore.
Yeah, I think some people see it. Sorry, Russell. I think some people see it. Like, I thought Tucker Carlson, when he spoke about this, not as it pertains to the Israel war, but he's spoken about how when you don't have freedom of discourse, freedom to say what you think is true. One of his last broadcasts on Fox News before he got fired was defending the African Socialist Party from a sort of Russiagate type charge. I think some people have understood, some people have come to understand, and I came to understand this in 2016, that if we don't have the ability to exchange ideas and opinions, then our differences don't matter. Like, whatever political differences between left and right are irrelevant if you're not able to voice those differences in a way that can actually make a difference, if it's all controlled in this very top-down way. I don't know why it's so difficult for most people to understand that. I think it's because most people, and this is going to sound like an extreme hair on fire libtard thing to say, but most people have fascistic tendencies. Most people think that they're right, and if they can crush the other side, then the world will be a better place. Like, I think that drive exists in the average person.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's just sad, you know?
Yeah.
Again, I certainly grew up with a different tradition. I never thought like that.
Yeah,
and not only did I not think like that, I remember being taught the exact opposite, like
right.
over and over and over again, that it was important to fight for people who have loathsome point of views. Like that's a crucial part of understanding what the First Amendment is. And they've gone away from teaching that. You know, there was an important moment, I think, when the ACLU, there was some division after Charlottesville, right? Like, remember there was an editorial in the New York Times saying we have to rethink our approach.
Right.
Maybe we didn't get Skokie right, that kind of thing. And now, I think you're right, Keaton. Like, it doesn't matter what our differences are if we can't hash out, if we can't even see them. You know what I'm saying? Like,
exactly.
if they're not visible, and we're just sitting in siloed areas and not even aware of the opposite arguments. I mean, that's been another eye-opening thing for me, is I still to this day talk to people who are in the business who don't know like 99% of the stuff that I worked on in the last year, and have assumptions that they got because they watch one or two channels and that's it. And so even kicking and screaming and throwing a fit as much as we did in the last year, it doesn't really do much in the end, because they can so effectively silo people now. And if both sides are going to do it and be cool with it, then there's no hope at all.
You know, with Zionism specifically, it's very ironic, because it's very much, they immediately saw what the problem was with speech is violence, right? They immediately saw what the problem is with that formulation, what an attack it is on the core premises of the First Amendment. That's a way of trying to have your cake and eat it too, right? You say you believe in freedom of speech, but speech you don't like is violence, so it's not protected by the First Amendment, right? Because violence isn't protected by it. It's a very dishonest formulation. They're doing with Zionism, they're getting around their supposed free speech bona fides by claiming that it's anti-Semitism, or more that it's eliminationist, right? They have to take it to eliminationist, because even anti-Semitism under their own premises would kind of be protected. So they have to take it to eliminationist, right? They have to take it, which is another way of saying language is violence, isn't it? I mean, it's.
Well, this is it's an existential threat, right?
Right.
Like everything.
Right.
An existential threat. And I mean, interestingly, like in the last year, if you go back and you look at a lot of the underlying premises of like the war on terror, I've had to study people like Carl Schmitt, who was a Nazi jurist from the 30s, who was very influential on a lot of the neocons who were sort of building Dick Cheney's the war on terror machinery. They very much believed in this idea that in an emergency situation, liberal democracy is basically bullshit, and that power belongs to the executive who seizes it, and that this is done because a core premise of the belief system is that there are friends and enemies, and our enemies mean to destroy us by violence. And this is a central part of the idea, is that justifying the use of absolute force. We have to, because if we don't, they will eliminate us, they will destroy us. And so what you're seeing with the Zionist argument is basically it's actually a more direct version of what we got after 9/11. You know, all of those homilies, you know, they hate us for our freedom,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. It was never really believable in any way that Al-Qaeda was actually going to wipe the United States off the face of the earth, even though they tried, you know.
God damn it with their 7-Elevens.
I mean, my favorite was always Bush. Was it Bush who talked about them spraying poison from drones over New York City and not explaining where the drones were going to be taking off from? That was my favorite one. But it was always the idea that anybody was going to actually wipe out the United States was ludicrous. So they never really made that argument.
Right.
They just sort of said that, you know, this is a clash of civilizations. They hate us. They will never stop. It's like a Terminator. Israel is openly saying, like, you must back what we're doing because they mean to remove us from the face of the earth. And you know, there's at least a patina of believability in that rhetoric, and that's why they're getting away with saying it. But you have to understand that, I mean, I think that this is just a version of the same argument we've been getting for 20 years.
We have to fight them here so that they don't come for you.
Right, exactly. And we have to exercise force because we must presume that our enemies mean to eliminate us. And that's the excuse for, you know, what that then you're right back in Dostoevsky land. Like, everything is permitted once you get there mentally. You know, that not only will harm befall us, but that will, you know, we will cease to exist if we allow this other side to speak, act, you know, have political agency, any of those things. And that's how they get away with making these arguments. And it's been baffling, I guess not baffling, but it's just been disappointing to see how effective it's been.
Please clap.